So you know how to,
I'm just trying to find something. I know it's on the
oh,
40.
nobody's
It's
here.
not north of the river. Smell, you're on candid camera.
Nobody's here.
I'll be there at 9. All right, okay, bye-bye.
Showtime.
All right. Good afternoon and welcome back. This has been a busy chambers today. Welcome to the November 15th special land use meeting. We'll go ahead and start. You know what? We'll do an invocation. Commissioner Smith, would you do the invocation for us, please?
Right here.
Yes, sir.
Can we bow our heads? Father God, we come before you tonight, giving all grace and mercy to you. Allow us to do your will tonight, Father God. Allow us to work in your name, Father. Allow us to work in unity and harmony, Father, in the best interest of the people that we serve. Father, continue to bless all of us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Well, this looks like a regular agenda. Let's see, we don't have a consent agenda, so we're just going to keep moving forward. We are here for two advertised public hearings. We will open both of the items at the same time. They will be heard at the same time. Nicole, do you have anything to add before we get started?
There are no changes to the agenda.
Okay. All right. Hey, Lisa.
Good evening, Lisa Barrett with staff. And I do actually have two public comment letters to hand out and enter into the record. Those have been provided to you. Those for agenda item number 2.
Oh, I missed future agenda.
Point of order,
Go
Madam
back.
Chair.
You know, I
Is
just
this a
realized,
comment?
yeah. Sorry, Lisa, I skipped
Sorry.
over citizen comments for future agenda
Okay.
items. I apologize. It's been a long day. The first one on the list is Mr. Jubilina. Mr. Jubilina, you'll have 3 minutes, sir.
Good evening, Commissioners. Glenn Gibolina for the record, citizen and taxpayer of Manatee County. Future agenda items. As you know, affordable housing is near and dear to me. I would just like to bring to the attention to the board about a piece of property that you either funded or we still own, but I was at the Manatee County Housing Authority a few weeks ago. I sat in on the board meeting. So in 2005, we spent $400,000, grant money, taxpayer money, somebody's money, to put up affordable housing. So according to the information I got, and by the way, it's no small piece of property, 16 acres. So the Manatee County Housing Authority came with their vertical structures in place, and they were ready to go. This is off of 28th Street and Canal Road. I personally went out there, walked the property, talked to the neighbors. So I guess for 11 years, once again, we sit on property that does not benefit anyone. So the Housing Board came in front of this commission and asked for a zoning change from ag to affordable housing. You turned them down. So now they sit with this property, $400,000, that is really used to no one. So we either correct the situation or we sell off the property. But for this to go on for 11 years when it was earmarked for affordable housing is just another boondoggle between government agencies that, in my opinion, are inefficient when it comes to something like this. There's got to be a better way, folks. I just don't get it. I mean, either the housing board, which I will tell you this, they haven't been back to this board to ask for a rezone in quite a number of years, so shame on them. I think they need to come back to the board and ask for a rezone and see what happens. But on the other side of the coin, is that administration should say, hey, 11 years, you guys ain't done anything. I mean, you'd think 5 years ago they'd come back and say, hey, maybe you should come back and try it again. I think the environment has changed. I think the millenniums need housing. So I just think there's a better way to do it. Again, you know, Canaan Elementary, 15 years, we sit on 19 acres. This prime piece of property, 11 years, haven't done anything with it. There's a better way, folks.
All right, Linda Neely, I don't know if you want to talk on a future agenda item. You didn't mark the sheets. I'm not sure if you want to speak on what we're.
Staff member told me that that's just a template and ignore everything so we get to the document.
Okay, Ms. Neely, do you want to speak on future agenda items? Okay,
Not mark it because I was told we were not having
okay.
future agenda by staff.
Actually, I didn't think we were, but it's on the agenda.
So your staff felt the same way?
Okay, Ms. Neely?
Yes.
Who is this Eye on Us Education? Is this,
I on U.S. education.
and I have the letter, why do I have this letter, please?
Because I discussed that with your staff as
Okay, well,
well.
please tell me.
You are having a public hearing. It is quasi judicial. According to your policy, groups are entitled to 10 minutes during a hearing.
So are you going to speak then, help me here.
I'm
You're
gonna
gonna
speak on
items
future
1 and 2
items.
that's coming up?
1 and 2 that are coming up.
Okay,
Yes.
then okay, but do you want to speak also on future agenda items?
Yes, I do.
Okay, then if you want, you can have 3 minutes on future agenda items, and we'll just hold this until we get into the meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
That'll be fine.
Go ahead, 3 minutes, yes, ma'am.
Okay. According to your policy and procedural manual, which you have posted on your webpage, you have applicability, and why you are allowed to make your own policy is because the state legislators put that in there. And when we talk about future agenda, it's really, initially, before you changed this in January of 2016, there was a right of the citizens to have public comment. It was just public comment. And it was changed to future agenda, and when I find, because I'm not prepared, because as I said, I was told we wouldn't be having this opportunity, that matters for board consideration. It's 2.1 of official board action. Any matters that relate to the board's duties, authority, or powers under Chapter 125 Florida statutes or other applicable law, or which relate to the county's property or legal or financial interests, or the public health, safety, welfare, or morals of Manatee County, may be brought before the board for appropriate consideration or action. So it doesn't say future agenda. And I've heard this board have argumentative conversations with the citizenry that it is not to be anything that isn't going to be a future agenda item. And my question here is, how large is your crystal ball? How can you perceive what the future will actually bring for your consideration? So I think really that when we put on the agenda that it's future agenda items only, that's an impossible feat for somebody to be able to consider that as an individual, because it's not possible for you to consider that, what is actually going to come. And it says any concern we have, up to and including morals. And you're going to tell, if I want to talk about morals, you're going to tell me that's not something we can control as a board. Move on. That's not a possible future agenda item. And you're probably exactly correct in that statement. But then your policy of calling it future agenda is wrong. And I would like the board to reconsider that title for public comments. It should be just exactly as your 2.1 state says. Any property, any legal issues, any public safety, welfare, or morals. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Neely. We will see you back here in just a few minutes. Ms. Corrier, would you like to come forward and make any comments about things that were said earlier by Mr. Jubilina, please?
Madam Chairman, members of the board, I could just clarify a couple items on that property. Mr. Gibolino was speaking about property that is not in Manatee, it's not a Manatee County property. It's owned by the Manatee County Housing Authority, and he's correct that back in 2004, $200,000 from the SHIP program and $200,000 from the CDBG program were requested by the Housing Authority to Manatee County. It was granted. They were going to move forward with a federal rural development grant to build affordable housing in that area. At some point in time in 2008, they chose to withdraw their application for rural development funds, so they no longer were going to pursue that property. So at that time, Manatee County requested that they refund the $200,000, which was one requirement, the federal funds from the CDBG program, and or sell the property and refund the county. So at some particular time then, several years later, we had been trying to assist them, the Housing Authority, with bringing potential purchasers to them. We've been doing that for many, many years. They met with many different people, and as you would recall, the housing market was very difficult at that time. There was an appraisal done by the Housing Authority out of their own funds, and that property was appraised, and so they are still currently have that property available to potentially move forward with a partner for development, for vertical build. Also at one particular time, our department brought back to the board the requirement for the county to refund the federal government for the $200,000 out of the CDBG program, which we did. We did a 2-year repayment, and so we have no obligation on that property. We are still seeking the Housing Authority to move forward with a development to potentially consider it for affordable housing, and but it is in their hands at this particular time.
Ms. Corrier, you are a wealth of information. Commissioner Benak.
Sherry, is this the one that I've asked you about? I've shared information with affordable housing developers. 2 of them, I've shared this information on this site with them to let them be aware of it, put them in touch. Okay, I just want to make sure. So we have been trying to get affordable housing developers interested in it. I know that I shared it with Harvey's son and shared it with him, and I shared it with that guy that does the single family development as well to see if they might be interested in this property. And actually, I can't remember Harvey's son's name. Travis seemed interested in it, so I put him in touch with him.
They actually have, commissioners, had a contract for purchase on that property several times over the last 4 or 5 years. The problem for the people purchasing is to find vertical build funds to, be able to complete the construction, and those previous contracts did fall through.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the Manatee County Housing Authority actually owns the property?
They do, sir.
And so we actually deeded it over to them?
They purchased the property.
Purchased from us.
We never owned the property. We provided funds for the purchase of the property within our housing program and some federal dollars on. The board approved that, and then they moved forward with the rural development grant. And acquisition under the CDBG program is an eligible activity, and so they used some of those funds to purchase the property.
What can you build there now?
They would have to build whatever it is zoned for right now and/or come back in for a rezone. And that's where, when Mr. Gibolina brought up the fact that they had come forward with a rezone request to do multifamily affordable housing for farm workers at that time, which was a requirement for the federal rural development grant, they were seeking a rezone. So whoever does come back onto the property, if they're going to do single-family or multifamily, would need to meet with the Building and Development Services Department to determine what type of a rezone they would need to do.
So so that project was turned down basically because there wasn't no rezone.
They chose not to move forward. It was not, at that time, it was not an acceptable project for the community. The community was not in favor of that. They came out, and the Housing Authority felt that it was best not to pursue that particular project.
I remember that, what took place. But I also think that I've talked about 2 or 3 people that's interested in that property that wants to build affordable homes that actually have met with me to my office.
They would be welcomed to contact Brenda Lovett with the Manatee County Housing Authority, and she is open and available. I can only tell you, I've probably referred 20 different people in the last 6 years that were interested, and so she would be available to speak with them.
And let me state for the record, because the Manatee Housing Authority has nothing to do with Manatee government.
That's correct.
Okay, because I done got my butt handed to me.
Oh, you did?
Oh, about
They
what,
do not have they are not
okay,
affiliated
about what
with.
they're not doing, and it's us not doing it, because it's Manatee County, think of Manatee County government.
Yeah, no, we do not,
Okay, I
correct. We
just
do not
wanna-
have any obligation on that property.
I
at
just
this
want to
time.
clarify that. Now, saying that, the workshop that I seen, that we reaching out for some type of partnership with the Manatee Housing Authority, is that correct?
Yes, and we have been, we're all willing to work together. They have the same problem that all the potential interested parties have, and that is they have no other access to vertical build funds from the federal government right now. And so they would be needing to seek either another investor or another way of building there. That's the problem that's been basically for all of us.
Okay, and this runs back, and I know Commissioner Benak, I've said it 4 or 5 times, during that time, when you were talking about building houses, nobody wanted it, especially if there's going to be workforce
Yeah.
or farming houses.
Farm worker housing was the
And
issue.
people came out in the woodworks and was totally opposed to anything dealing with farming at all from that standpoint. How would I get that information for that property? The meeting that took place here, do we have a record of that?
Information on the type of property it is and what.
Correct.
We can provide that.
Okay.
Denise,
I
did
can
that.
interrupt. Is that something where maybe y'all can have a meeting so we can get
Yes.
moving forward on this meeting? Thank
Well,
you.
yeah, I mean, it's land use, and I want people to understand what we're doing out
Make it
there.
available to all the commissioners.
Okay,
Thank
all
you.
right.
Ms. Correa, thank you for the rest and the real true parts of the story. Okay, is there anyone else from the public that would like to come forward and speak on future agenda items? Not seeing anyone, we will close public comment. We don't have a consent agenda. We don't have an advisory board appointments. So we're just going to move right on down to Building and Development Services. Item 1 and 2, we will open together, Nicole?
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay.
Item number 1 is LDCT 1605, Ordinance 1624, which is Land Development Code Text Amendment, countywide amendments, to include several amendments to all the chapters of the LDC, as recommended by Little John, to improve opportunity for infill, redevelopment, and development within the urban area along the urban cores. And item number 2 is LDCT 1602, Ordinance 1606, which is Land Development Code Text Amendment, Urban Cores Amendment. And these amendments are to include establishing design guidelines and standards for specifically designated urban cores, providing some definitions, review authority and procedures, setting maximum densities and intensities, and adding a new map to depict the geographical extent of the urban cores.
And these are legislative, not quasi-judicial, according to what I'm looking at. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Lisa?
Good evening, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Lisa Barrett with staff, and I have been sworn. As Ms. Knapp already read into the agenda, or into the record, we have the county-wide amendments and the urban corridor amendments, and this is the second hearing before the Board of County Commissioners. We went into great detail at the last meeting, so today we're asking for your approval of both amendments. We do not have a full presentation, but I know there is public here to speak, so with that, I'll leave it open to any questions, or I can come back on when the public speaks.
Commissioner Whitmore.
Well, I know we had our first public hearing, but don't we have anything for the public? Because I know there's 2 people here that weren't at the last public hearing of the public. So I know, isn't there any, I mean, are you going to present anything?
We have the same slide presentation from last time that we can go through if you would like.
Well, we've seen it at least 2 or 3 times, but, you know, there are people here that weren't here last time, so I think you should. It's up to you guys. It's up to the board. Or a brief,
How about a brief presentation?
yeah, in
Brief.
all fairness to the people that are here. I don't think
This
she
is
can talk
the
much
second
faster.
public hearing, so maybe a brief
Yeah,
discussion.
public hearing.
Good evening. My name is Pat Chayeski. I'm a senior planner with Little John. And I'll just go through the slides from last time, but with brief comments. Okay, so basically what we're doing today is it's the final step on the implementation of the vision for the commercial corridors in the urban core. The corridors that we're talking about, we have 6 segments. They include Manatee Avenue West, Cortez, 53rd Avenue, 41 or Tamiami Trail, 15th Street East, and 1st Street. We went through the comprehensive plan amendments, and those were approved and adopted, and they're in effect today. And basically what that did, it allowed us to start allowing and encouraging mixed use along these corridors, allowing higher densities and intensities, additional building height, and eliminating certain obstacles for a development review. The specific land use designations that this would apply to are 6 of them: retail, office, residential, mixed use, residential 6 through 16, industrial light, and industrial heavy. So with the comprehensive plan done and in place, what we're looking at tonight is the Land Development Code, which implements the comprehensive plan. So when we went through that process, we identified changes that didn't just apply to the urban corridors, but there were some changes that we needed to make that would apply countywide. Most of them were just cleanups, moving sections from here to there, fixing some mistakes that we found. And we have a list of all those changes that were included in the packet, and these slides show. But the only thing that we're changing that would really represent a change from what the way we're doing things in the county have to do with calculating density and intensity for mixed-use developments. And that is something that was not in the code before, so we had to come up with a way of doing it. And the other one was in the Chapter 10. We are including now standards for parking for mixed-use developments, and also including more predictable loading standards. And also now we're going to be requiring bicycle parking. So to give you an idea of what the mixed-use parking would look like, we took a table that the ULI put together, and basically it assigns a percentage of use depending on the type of use that you would include in that mixed-use development. And this is an example of that. If you have a mixed-use development with apartments, office, retail, and let's say a restaurant, if you calculate it based on today's code, they would have to provide 264 spaces. So we want to reduce that number so we don't have as much asphalt that would be unused. The first thing that we do is subtract the handicap spaces. We're not going to reduce those. So the balance would be 252. So when we apply the percentages, which it depends on the time of the day, whether it's a weekend or a weekday, we see that we come up with a bunch of numbers. We take the highest number from that table, and that would be the required parking for the mixed-use development. So we're going from 252 to 199. So that's all related to just countywide changes. Now, specifically talking about the urban corridors, we also went chapter by chapter and explaining what the changes that we're proposing are. In terms of definitions, we included some new definitions related to urban corridors, starting with the definition of what it is. In terms of density, we pointed out that density has many different ways of achieving density on a site. It could be like the first picture, a bunch of houses on a site, or it could be a high-rise with apartments only occupying a certain portion of your site. When we talk about intensity, it's the same thing. Floor area ratio is how we measure that. It could look like a building that occupies your whole site, or it could look like a two-story building that occupies half of your site, or we could go all the way up to a multi-story that occupies only a small portion of your site. All those scenarios show the same intensity. So when it comes to mixed use, there are two ways of doing it. One is where you do your density, so many units per acre, but then when you add the commercial, then you have to make sure that both commercial and residential do not exceed that intensity. So if the FAR says 1, all those uses together cannot exceed that FAR of 1. Now, for the urban corridors, we're going to be doing that differently because this is where we want to incentivize development and encourage higher intensity development. In this case, they're calculated separately. So you could do 1 FAR, and on top of that, you can do your 20 dwell units per acre, or whatever the density is that you can have on your site. In the definitions chapter, we explain how density and intensity will be calculated in the urban corridors. Chapter 3, we exempted development within the urban corridors from special approval, and also establish a new system for modification of standards. Those are not exactly variances, they're based on design. So they don't have to prove hardship, but it's more related to achieving better design. In terms of zoning, this was where we went in and started allowing certain uses where they were not allowed before. So we can have some residential in commercial districts or commercial in residential districts within the urban corridors only. We added 2 new tables to Chapter 4, and basically what they are is they would help people know that if you have a certain land use category, which zoning districts can I rezone to in order to be able to use those standards that we're coming up with for urban corridors. The other table that we included includes standards like maximum building height and setbacks. Maximum building height, as you can see here in this table, for the lowest intensity land use category, which is, or zoning district in this case, residential multifamily, it's 3 stories. But if you qualify for a bonus, you could go up to 5. So it's the same idea throughout the different districts. You can have your base density, and then your bonus lets you go higher. So the maximum height that you could have is 5 by right, 7 with a bonus. And then the setbacks, I know that you received a letter. Somebody was commenting on how when you do this new urbanism type of development, sometimes they put the building too close to the sidewalk. We addressed that from the very beginning. We're not doing that. There is a minimum of 10, maximum of 20. There is not going to be parking in the front, but we're not going to have buildings right next to your sidewalk. We know that there are certain things like the airport regulations. We're not trying to circumvent those. Those are still in effect. And we're going to be taking care of compatibility with single-family homes in the area. So that's something that I'll talk about later. We added some standards for gas stations and drive-thrus because we know they're not going to be denser, more intense than the rest, but we want to have street walls for those. And Chapter 9 is where all the standards for the urban corridors are located. Anything related to architecture, building form, location of buildings, and parking on this site. This picture shows what we have seen in the past, which is a suburban pattern of development. We see a medium, starting to bring the building closer to the street. Now the building's closer to the street. We have seen this in Bradenton. It has been working fine. And again, like I said, we don't want to get to the point where Sarasota is, where the buildings are too close to the street. We have, I mentioned, standards for design to avoid blank boxes, buildings that don't have any architectural detail. So with those standards in place, we're going to make sure that the buildings have interest. There are standards designed to protect single-family homes that are outside the corridors. And it will be a combination of setbacks and landscaping and a wall. Basically, we looked at other communities to see what they were doing and realized that that was a good idea to start asking for more setback as the building gets higher. And what we're proposing is that whatever setback your single-family home next door has, that's the setback that you're going to have. And in addition to that, you're going to go back 20 feet for every story above 3 stories. Then, in terms of development review, there's going to be less dependence on plan development and special approval. And then I mentioned bonuses before. So the way the bonuses work, we came up with a list of items that the county would want to see in this area, and they included vertical mixed use, affordable housing, workforce housing, public open space, and parking garages. The idea is that whenever somebody comes in with a proposal that proposes any of these items, they will be able to have either more density or more intensity or more height. One condition is that to qualify for the bonus, they cannot have any buildings within 100 feet from that single-family home site. One of the key points that I need to make is that we're changing regulations, but it's only for those people that want to come in and do something different, because whatever is there today, it's still conforming. If anybody wants to come in and do exactly what we've been doing for the past so many years, they can still do it. But if somebody wants to come in and do mixed use, affordable housing, workforce housing, retail on the first floor, apartments above, now they can do that without having to go through the plan development process. And that's all I have. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Commissioner Benak.
Yeah, I appreciate all the work that you've put into this, and we've had many, many workshops, many discussions about these new standards, which are incentive standards to try to create a more intense development in the urban core where the services are available. There was an article that was in the Sarasota Herald that is attached by reference as one of the comments, which talked about the expected growth in Florida and the land that it would take to accommodate that growth unless you increase the density and intensity in the existing urban area. So I hope everybody read that. I did ask for that to be attached, and it is attached as part of the background, because this is a way to keep from gobbling up our important farmland. I do have a concern, and I have brought this up to staff. This is Florida. We can grow anything, but we need to make sure that we continue to have significant landscaping. Probably more landscaping is needed as you intensify to be able to keep the quality of life that we have in this community. I've seen some redevelopment that I don't think is meeting that standard in Manatee County. I've seen it on US 41. There's a project, I was trying to find it on Google Earth, I couldn't find it, where there's pavement all the way to the right-of-way line. No landscape strip at all. I've been assured, and that's why I asked for this letter to be attached, because he brings up a good point. Typically, the sidewalk is in the right-of-way, so typically you don't have to take up that green space for sidewalk. This is what the gentleman's concern is. But I want to make sure that when we're doing redevelopment, that we're mandating green space, because it's going to be important to have this to mitigate the impacts of having higher density and intensity in the urban core. It's got to be walkable and it's got to be livable. We have to have green space and we have to have shade trees, not just little bushes. So I see that those standards are still in there, but I'm going to be watching real closely, because I've seen some redevelopment corridors where we don't get it. All we're getting is some little, little bushes, and that's not going to cut it. We need to continue to have shade trees to make sure, and I know it's difficult. We're going to have the right kind of trees, whether they be, olive trees, whatever. We know maybe live oaks won't work, but we're going to have to make sure that we continue to have the green space even as we go into this redevelopment. Do you feel confident that we have the standards in place to ensure that we're going to continue to have the green space?
When we talk about the right-of-way side, we're giving the option, like between the sidewalk and the building, it's a 10-foot, maybe 20 feet. We're saying if you have like a hotel or an office building where you need that buffer, you can put landscaping in that area, but we're not requiring it. It doesn't say that. If you're going to have retail or a restaurant, we're allowing them to have a paved area. Maybe it's outdoor seating, maybe it is potted plants, but we don't have a requirement for any green within that area. Now, given that 41 is not a road where we can go in and say, put a tree within the right-of-way, it makes it difficult to create that parkway. We, in the complete street standards that we created, that were approved recently, we talk about that in that report, where it is important to create that buffer between the travel lanes and the sidewalks, where you have a strip of green with trees. We believe that that's the main difference between how we used to do things and now, how we started doing the suburban way, that within the right-of-way, then there needs to be green. Now, FDOT would decide whether you can have a tree in that right-of-way or not. That's a key point that it's hard to deal with. Now, the other thing, and I know this is not, it's longer term. Whenever you do this type of development, and you have seen Baldwin Park, you have seen Celebration, the idea is that you're going to intensify development within the private sites. In return, there is going to be, in the public realm, there are going to be more parks and common open space. The Central Park in New York, the large scale, the Central Park in Winter Park. It's, a park within the very urban area. And the idea is that those green spaces are going to be used by the community. They're not private. That's where, most people will gather, and that's where you have the trees and the grass and all that. So there needs to be a balance between what happens on the site and what happens for the public. There are still landscaping regulations for the parking lots. So the parking lots are not going to be bare. We still have the same requirements that you have for everybody else. Parking islands and the buffers. We still have, the buffers between the corridors and the single-family homes. So those standards are still there. But the idea is that the landscaping is going to be more urban.
And I don't have a problem with more urban. I have a problem with pavement to pavement and no green space. It's not a area where anyone wants to sit. It's not an area where anyone wants to walk. It's an area for cars. And that's what we're trying to get away from. So I want to make sure that we have adequate space for landscaping, even along places like US 41, because this is corridors. That's what we're dealing with, is roadways. So I want to make sure that we're not eliminating our landscaping requirements along these corridors.
On that note, Commissioner Benak, I agree with you. Green space is very important. But ironically, I was going to bring this up. I think it's something that maybe after the beginning of the year, perhaps we could have a workshop on landscape and green space and all this, because I can tell you in some areas, my concern, and I've heard from several business owners, in some areas we do have a problem where we have so much greenery that the business can hardly be seen, and that's not helping their business at all either. So it's something that I think we need to look at and make sure that we're doing it correctly, so we're not harming any businesses that are trying to make a living and have people working. Commissioner Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have some of the same concerns that Commissioner Benak mentioned. Allow me to ask you this question here. Old Main Street, right here, Old Main Street. People out there sitting, eating dinner, drinking a glass of wine. It's not that much sidewalk, but it's enough for you to sit and eat and still walk past. So the width of what you're saying, 10 to 20 feet, would that work?
Yes.
Where you can sit outside and dine,
Yes.
have a glass of wine or drink or whatever it may be, and still have that friendly atmosphere where people can walk through?
Yes, because we're talking about measuring that from the edge of the sidewalk, basically where the property line is back.
Because people are getting to the point where they want outside dining. I mean, that's big in Florida right now, especially if you have someone that's smoking. And I know we received this, and I know Commissioner Benak and all of us received this here from someone in Sarasota specifically, dealing with the city of Sarasota, I believe Mike Lachey. And he made some good points in this letter, and I think they've been addressed. But if you look, I don't know if you've seen this.
Yeah, I read the letter.
Okay. You look at the difference in these sidewalks, that's a major difference. To Commissioner Bedak's point, you got landscaping on one, but on one, you just got a narrow sidewalk where only two people can actually walk down there. So there's nothing you can have outside. I'm not talking about for parking cars or anything like that. I get that. I believe we should have them close to the road. But there's a difference. In one document, it has where it's actually landscaping in front of the building. And why this is important is because when I go to Sarasota and I see the new buildings, they're so close to the road that they're
Yes.
in the road.
I know.
I mean, it's just too close to the road, where you just can't even hardly walk through from that standpoint, where you could just reach over and knock a window out if you want to. So we're not creating anything like that, right?
If you want to look at the picture that I have on the monitor here, I don't know who can change the camera. We had included very similar graphics when we were working on this. To that,
I can't see it.
to the overhead camera.
Is he there?
Okay, he got it. So this is part of the, of chapter 9, and we're showing the options that people would have. The one on the left shows that if somebody wants to have a table outside, they're going to have room to do that between the sidewalk and the building. The picture on the right shows when you have a hotel or multifamily where you would decide that it would be better to have shrubs and trees, they can do that too. We didn't want to require everybody to have green in the front, because if you have continuous buildings with continuous retail, you don't want to interfere with that flow of traffic, of pedestrian traffic, window shopping. So that's why it's more of, it depends on the use that you decide whether you go green or hardscape.
Even in that scenario, and I understand why, but in this area that we're talking about, it seems to me that's a difference than areas that Commissioner Bob may be talking about. For example, when you revitalize in the community, you want to have it set up where developers that can come in and kind of negotiate with staff. At the same time, you want to make sure you're not negotiating just cement everywhere. Landscaping has shown to slow traffic also when you want people to shop, where they can actually view and see what's going on. They can turn off and park and come out. It slows down instead of having everything cement and brick where people just ride. I mean, because people looking at the scenery. They look at it, oh, look at that landscaping. I'm going to pull over here. I park my car, then I walk down the road.
Yeah,
So I just want to make
that
sure.
landscaping should be between the sidewalk and the road. That should be within the right-of-way,
Okay.
because that helps provide shade for the pedestrians and also for the cars, if you have any cars parked along that road. That's typically the purpose of that parkway.
Okay, and to the point where Sandy Marshall is not here, to his point that he was making in at the last meeting, the process of us doing this here is basically to improve the process and to revitalize areas that no one would invest in.
Yes.
I mean, no one is pulling permits that I know of in that area, trying to encourage development, get people creative from that standpoint. Staff will make the decision on it, work with the developers, be creative, allow them to put plans together from that standpoint, and that will cut down the process of time, how long it would take, and give more density for people to actually develop, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And one more thing, in that chapter 9, there is a section called public right-of-way improvements, and it says, along roadways other than state roadways, the developer shall be responsible for the provision of curbing the parkway, in parentheses, landscaping strip between the sidewalk and the travel lane, and sidewalk as follows. In the landscape zone, we're telling them that it has to be at least 5 feet wide. They have to install landscaping and tree furniture within that area. And all that is the responsibility of the applicant. So the idea is that whenever they come in to develop a site, they're going to fix the sidewalk in front of them, and that's where they're going to put the street tree. And I was saying before that people are not allowed to just go and put a tree within the right-of-way of FDOT, so those are a little bit more complicated. But wherever we have the opportunity, if it is a county road, it would be a lot easier for staff to say, yes, as part of your development, you need to improve the parkway too.
And my last point, in the city of Palmetto, more likely it was in the CRA zone, but we had incentives for landscaping to encourage you to landscape case by case. If we think it should be more landscaping, we had an incentive for you to landscape more from that and to get you tax increments and give you opportunity to develop more. Because you got a case-by-case situation. If you look down 14th Street, you got large parcels of land that's ripe for development. You know, you got the old Ford, is that the old Ford dealership down there? Or- I mean, tons of property there from that. So this is very important for us to move forward. But to Commissioner Bernanke, I agree with her, something like that, we would want to make sure it's something that we can do. But I can see landscaping in that, if somebody creates something there, you got your parking in the back, and you may have your little landscaping in the back too, but you don't want to overdo it. But there may be a certain development, you say, yeah, this is great, but we need intensify landscaping, for example. It could be something for staff to make that decision.
Well, we have one of the incentives to obtain, to get a bonus. It's called public open space and amenities.
Okay.
Now, we did not specify how much landscaping they have to have, but it says that it should include amenities like landscaping, hardscaping, and furnishings.
Correct. It
So
could
that
be a
would be
case by
the,
case.
you know, if
Exactly.
somebody comes in and says, I'm going to preserve this, 3,000 square foot of space, and I want to put a bench and some tree or grass, that automatically gives them additional density and intensity.
And-
So
and
we
I
are
don't-
incentivizing that too.
And I don't know if we deal with color in Manatee County yet, the way you can paint a building.
No.
We don't deal with that. Well, the old Kentucky Fried Chicken on 8th Avenue, I'm gonna give you a little history. It was painted yellow.
I remember.
Yeah, it was painted yellow after Kentucky Fried Chicken closed down. And it was the biggest complaint in the city.
We don't.
And so the city went to him, encouraged him, and they got an ordinance now. Please, you need to change that color. Because it took everything away from 8th Avenue. It's a beautiful business. He's doing wonderful. But you have to be careful about colors. It can offset anybody who wants to be close to you. I don't know if you've seen a picture when it was just high yellow. And so you have to be very careful because it would kill any development if you got a color. I don't want to be to that close to that building. It's not good. But anyway, they had him to repaint it, and they gave him an incentive to do it. But they do have color criteria in those areas because that's the CRA zone, because you would get a whole mixture of colors that you've never seen before. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Whitmore.
Well, in St. Pete, you go down and over Fourth, where the Vinoy and all that is, and all the businesses there and the apartments, it's all multi-use. And I was sitting here thinking, listening to everybody talk, and it's totally sidewalks and in front of the building. Everything's encouraged outside, but every building and business has pots, trees, landscaping, because they want to attract to that where they are. So I think, like Vanessa said, I don't know, I agree with what you're doing, because I think that everybody's going to want people to go into their business, or they want them to eat at their restaurant, and they're going to make it attractive for the market to bring them there. So I don't think that, we should get involved with that. We're giving them incentives if they do that, but then they can do all the other stuff, like you said, the furniture and all that stuff outside.
Good.
So, but I noticed in St. Pete, totally, I don't even see any, I see potted plants and plants all over and planters, and it's so lush, you would think you're in a forest. So,
it's important.
anyway, I think it could be done.
We don't have anyone else on the board. Amazing. So I'm going to go ahead and open this to public comment. We did open both of these items together, so Linda Neely, I have a card for you in your letter, so you will have 10 minutes.
Good evening again. In trying to prepare for this meeting, your documents, like right now, I can't open anything. It says that your site is taking way too long to answer. I did get some Citizens Action to send me some of the documents. And I think that the intent here of the board is that at one time, we talked to you all about ICLEI and the UN. And you're talking about sustainable, walkable, bikeable communities is what you actually are moving forward to. That circumvents the rights of the citizens to decide for themselves. You're going to give them one box to pick out of.
It's an incentive.
Well, it's an incentive, okay. But all your rules and regulations are geared towards that. And when you say that the developers are going to pay for that, once again, I'm going to argue that point absolutely. Developers are there for one thing, profit. Most businesses don't exist to be philanthropists or charities. If they're very successful and they have excess money and it would be going to taxation to Uncle Sam, they'd rather give it away than pay taxes on it. They get a better cut back to themselves. So you're incentivizing them to develop a standard that in the material that I read, the corridor along 41, along the Tamiami Trail, is over 28% car lots. Now, I think they're there because people want to buy cars, and they want to sell cars, and people want to have single-use vehicles. You know, I drive down 41 and I go, look at that, there's a person sitting on the bench waiting for the bus, because that's a rare occurrence. They're not using your public transportation. And I've heard it in the meetings, we subsidize every ridership. The taxpayer subsidizes the ridership. Government doesn't, the taxpayers do, because you don't have enough people actively using it. You know, in New York City, the train, the subway, that is highly subsidized, and they have 17 million people to use the subway. So just like, you know, socialism, you think if you do it the right way and you have enough people to do it, you're going to finally be successful. That's not always true at all. So far, there hasn't really been a successful model at that. When you look at the European countries, they're in deep financial trouble still today. How many times have they bailed out Greece? Okay, and Turkey and others. So you want to get people to be paying, you're incentivizing the builders so they can put some more money in their pocket to do things a certain way, and limiting the options of the public by this land code. That's why I'm against it. Also, you talk about protecting the farmland. You know, there's families that own that farmland. And just like when the Rawls, when the patriarchs passed away on Fort Hamer Road, they paid a horrible penalty, because the IRS doesn't wait until you get your financial house in order to pay the estate taxes. They want them now, and they go after the now money. So you want to protect the agricultural, but maybe that family wants to cash out. Maybe the new family doesn't want to. And to sell it as agricultural land is far, far less money to that family than to sell it to a developer to build what they envision as great communities. And I think this is mostly centered towards the western section of the county. But once you start there, then you want to move it, you know, you want to make it more uniform, because that's the goal that always seems to happen. Let's make it all uniform, all the same. And I understand they said that they have the right to not take that model and accept it. But that's going to be their choice and their customers' choices. But remember, the developer doesn't pay it, just like the impact fee. They don't pay it. They put it in the price tag of the home that they sell, and they pay it. That if it's a rental apartment, the tenants pay for it. And that's the facts. That's, education has to look at realities. And when I looked at your supporting documents for the corridor section, you're using data from 2002 because the groups that you consulted with elected not to develop new sources of data. This is 2016. Things change at a rapid speed today. That legacy phone you buy for $900 in 6 months is considered antique. And so we're basing our staff's work on studies that are from 2002 or earlier. I think that's an error on the part of this board. And so we have some little statements there that this is to protect and promote the welfare and health of the residents of Manatee County. And I just recently learned that you have an administrative authority that can be, I don't know who the person is that gives it, but they can give an exemption to any of your land use codes. And they don't need you to tell them that they can or they cannot. And so when you have an administrative authority that is outside of the bounds of this document, you're punifying everybody else that follows within it. If you have a land use code, you can't have waivers and you can't have authority of one individual to give an exemption, and yet you presently do. I did a public records request as to who the individual was that happened to give one that is personally affecting me. If you can hear my voice, I'm having problems with my lung capacity because of a situation, and that is being allowed to continue to occur because of a waiver from somebody within Manatee County government. So you're talking about passing these tonight, and until you look at those situations that I've brought up, that you have data that for all effects is stale and outdated, you shouldn't go forward, because you should be using current data with the, we added, 40,000 residents since 2002? So we've substantially added to our population rate. We have no solution for our workers who are working in the lower income rate for affordable housing. I don't see anything in here that's gonna help those people, because you're talking about, condensing them. Do they want to live like that? Did anybody ask them? Or do they want to live in single-family homes? I didn't see a questionnaire that asked the people of Manatee County what their preferences was. I know we had how do we grow, but I think that growth was actually geared towards how would the county governance also grow with it. And I think that smaller government and more personal choices is always actually better than a set of rules that's 1,000 pages long and can be immediately, like that, waived by the stroke of a pen. I think they use a pen, because I also requested to see that waiver in a public records request, and I haven't seen that waiver yet. So I don't know if it's oral or written or exactly how it operates. So I would say, take your time, don't pass it, relook at it, get some more actual public input, because there's one statement that really did strike at me. It said that the public participation in this project was extremely high, and that it was conclusive that the public support for it was great. And I mean, most people that I talk to, they go, I can't come and talk because I have no clue what you're even talking about, what's going on down there. And people are complacent. They think that you're always going to do the right thing for them. And I think sometimes it's what's great for government, not what's great for the people. Thank you.
Ms. Neely, so you know, I went ahead and let you speak for 10 minutes, but your letter does not state that I on U.S. Education authorizes you to speak on their behalf. So you might want to get your letter redone. Just wanted to mention that to you. No, it doesn't. I have it. Is there anyone else from the public that would like to come forward and speak? State your name, you'll have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon or good evening, David Gustafson, a local Bradenton resident, been here since 1973. I was not planning on speaking, but I need to go on record. I do not agree with the past speaker at all. I was the former DDA director for the city of Bradenton, and we had a tremendous amount of naysayers that essentially said the same thing when we started many years ago about redeveloping downtown Bradenton. And I think if we all kind of imagine what's out there right now, the Riverwalk, the hotels, Main Street, as many of you know and walk down on a daily basis, I think those naysayers have all disappeared. I remember going on camera when the Riverwalk was under construction, and they said that this was a boondoggle and government should not be doing these kind of things. Well, every one of those individuals, I believe, have gone underground and no longer need to say anything because we know that what an amazing Riverwalk that is to this day. And I will say that I'm no longer with the city of Bradenton, and I'm a developer now. And developers, it's like you can't throw one population or race or anybody into the same pool. I have a conscience. I like to do things the right way. I've been here since 1973. And I really believe that this area that we are focusing on and have been focusing on for months and maybe more than a year,
Many years.
is without a doubt, this is a necessity. I remember living off of Wares Creek in a time when it was pretty rough. And I would clean up my neighborhood and clean up my yard and do those kind of things, and I would have neighbors that would start saying, you know what, I want to do the same thing. And so before you know it, it's contagious. And that's really what needs to happen, and this absolutely needs to be approved by you, board, the Board of County Commissioners. And I commend your staff, and I commend your vision for focusing on this area that has been forgotten by many people, not y'all. Thank you.
Thank you. It's nice to hear something positive for a change. Anyone else from the public want to come forward?
For the record, Glenn Gibolina. What I didn't hear in this land use was and I'm going to use my community as an example because you're more than welcome to come over to New Pierce and take a look of the destruction that the rezoning did my community. You guys came in, you bulldozed a ordinance that came through and rezoned our complete residential neighborhood to light manufacturing. We didn't ask for it, but the vision to be said, oh, well, between Whitfield and Televast, we've got stay-built pavers and we've got McLeod, so let's just rezone these 65 houses. This has been going on for 20 years. Our life,
20 years.
20 years.
Oh,
Okay,
McClash.
Blame him.
There you go.
okay. The point is, you did not, it says here, provide the health and welfare of the community. You've done not even close. It's a living hell there. All I am saying is that next time you rezone a residential to light manufacturing, you better inform the residents that, you know what? If there's heavy manufacturing, you're going to get hammered. You're not going to sleep at night. Those pavers are going to go 24/7. That heavy manufacturing is allowed to operate 7 days a week. We don't care if it's 100 feet from your home, which it is. There has to be safeguards in place. There is nothing. And this has gone on since Triton left, Stay Built was there, Baker trailers. And not once have you told the new tenants, say, look, you're heavy manufacturing, but you're next to a residential area. We're going to have to put some safeguards in for the residents of the community. You've never done that. There's not a commission up here that would live in my community for 1 week. You'd be going to an air and noise specialist, the silica sand, the dust, the traffic, the noise, the pounding. It's absolutely wrong that you rezone that, and there's no quick fix. I think residential, if you got 50 houses that have been there since 1932, leave us alone. We're not going to bulldoze on our houses to put in a warehouse for light manufacturing. It's never going to happen. So you need to reconsider these older communities before you get this vision of rezoning our properties and making our lives miserable.
This isn't in our thing.
20 years ago. Who was on the board 20 years ago? Wasn't us. Commissioner DeSabatino?
I always appreciate when the citizens come and speak, and I know which community Glenn is referring to off of Talavas, 28th Street, Court East, and you're surrounded. But to my knowledge, that was years and years ago. To my knowledge, this board and previous boards have never zoned from an ag or anything to light or heavy industrial. We've never reversed it. We fought a couple years back on a property that had light manufacturing entitlements that wanted to do a cement batch plant right near you. And this board voted against that because it is transitioning to residential. So in the last at least 10 years since
No,
you've been on?
we've done one waste management. We went from ag to waste management out by DeWitt.
Well,
That's
That was,
way out
yeah, I know,
east.
but that's the
Yeah.
only one that we've
Okay.
done that I can
Out east.
remember.
so, you know,
Yeah.
Right.
I know we're very sensitive to making sure that there's levels and barriers between residential and commercial and manufacturing. I know right near you on the other side of 301, I have it all the time where there is a strategic materials where there's glass, and Mr. Barnott knows what I am talking about. It's a glass recycling plant, and it backs to a mobile home park, and the mobile home was in before the company, so, you know, it just, but they had entitlements. And so we're always fighting with DEP and everything about air quality, and it's tough. It's tough to do, but that's all. Thank you.
You know, what I find interesting is that, Mr. Giuliani, you come up here and you make it sound like we've done all this, and none of us were even on the board when it occurred. So, you know, you might want to just think about how you word things, because it's not really helping you in any way. Before I go to more commissioners, is there anyone else from the public that would like to come forward and speak? Not seeing anyone, I will close public comment. Commissioner Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to make sure that we're not building warehouses. We're not giving incentives to build warehouses, storage facilities directly right on the main drag. And I'm going to say this over and over again, Patrick Roth and Gene Gallo, they always concerned about, you know, what the city's doing, which they're doing a great job. But their concern always is, can we match up with the county government and make things better in unincorporated area? And they talk about that all the time, and I'm in agreement with them. The city of Braden's doing some wonderful things down there. They're moving slumming black, buying property. You either get your act together in code enforcement, sell it, or we're putting you out of business. And I appreciate everything that was said, but those areas there, people not streaming to run in there and develop anything. And she's absolutely right. A developer's not going to come in there unless it make economic sense,
That's right.
and I don't blame them.
Me neither.
I'm a businessman too. If I'm going into a high-risk area where you have drugs, narcotics, and some people living there, decent people are living there, that need help and want to better their life, and children, this is a tool to move that barrier from what they're living in now. You have tons of good residents there, but you have some undesirable. They live in that area. And we need something to encourage people to revitalize that area and make that thoroughway goes all the way down the trail to Sarasota and hook up and look beautiful, in my opinion. It's not going to happen overnight, but this is the start. For the things with staff, if things get out of control with staff, we can easily reel that back in as a board. But we need to be creative. And I've had some people to call me, and I haven't had a chance to return phone calls. Some real solid people, and you know them, that's very interested in what we're doing. And I have not had the conversation with them, but I'm looking forward to calling them earliest tomorrow. But this is the start. But if you look at per capita of the resources that we're putting in those areas with law enforcement, I mean, this is a tip in the bucket. Because lack of housing and decent community values encourage crime and development. And this gives the opportunity for someone who don't have the money to fix their property up, now it becomes valuable where they can sell it to someone who has the money to do so. They can package property together. The property value will increase. And by law, we have to replace people in those areas. We're just not putting people out on the streets. But I have not seen increases in development in these areas, no more than what the Braden is doing both sides. Man, they're just moving those hotels that was crime-ridden with drugs and narcotics for many years. And they're replacing it with something. And let's talk about the tax value, the increase in property value, the revenue that we can bring back into the coffers. Let's talk about property delinquency, taxes not being paid. I talked to someone in that area, you know, based on this passing, he got 6 houses he may want to sell because it become valuable, or he may want to get invested into doing something that's beautiful for that area. So, yeah, it's something different, but it's a start. And it's in that area. It's nothing north of the river, but it's a start. And so this is something that I think that we really need, and it's no guarantee that developers will still buy into what we're talking about. So it's a risk on our side also. But I certainly can tell you that everyone I talk to say if it makes economic sense and business sense, we have no problem doing it. But no one is going to put the equity up and take a big risk if you don't have things in place that make common sense to them. And frankly, a lot of them lose on the first development and don't make a serious profit to get to the second development because they got people now know they're building a good project. And so now the question about old data from 2002, could you address that? Is that correct? It was mentioned that we're using data from 2002.
Well, if you look at some of our attachments, it's got dates.
Well, it's a history of everything we've been through.
Okay.
Commissioner Smith, Madam Chair, the reason why we included the previous documents is because since the inception of the comprehensive plan, it was recognized that we really needed to look at the urban core, provide for land use incentives to promote infill and redevelopment within Southwest County. And that has been reiterated in the studies that are attached in your e-agenda since, I think it was really 2005 with the community compatibility character study and multiple studies after that, which are still have recommended over the years that we get to where we are today. So it's taken that many years, and we do have current data that's also in your agenda packet that was provided from Littlejohn based on current population standards and analysis that was done for this project as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Exactly. Are you finished, Commissioner Smith?
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Benak?
Yeah, this is very different than what you have in Ms. Neely's neighborhood, Mr. Gibolina's neighborhood. This is very, very, very different. It's very specific. It has an extreme amount of standards that have to be met. It's very prescriptive, and you may not like it because people want to live on a single-family home in a single-family subdivision. Well, guess what? There's lots of opportunities in Manatee County to do that. No one is taking away anyone's opportunity to live on a single-family home in a single-family neighborhood. What this does is take a look at our neglected urban core and provide the standards to improve the quality of life for people that are going to live there. You just need to read through it. I read through it all at home. I was able to click, no problem, on the internet, pull up all the standards. I don't know why you're having trouble. I'm able to do it from my iPad at home, and that's where I read through these standards. I do want to correct something that was stated as I was just flipping through here. There is a standard for colors. It says
I asked
specifically,
the question.
under building
Not
color,
white, yellow.
says a minimum combination of 2 colors shall be required per building. And again, I'm reading this maybe slightly out of context. You can tell me doesn't where it applies and where it doesn't. Black, fluorescent, or neon as the predominant exterior color is prohibited.
Okay.
So there are some standards.
That yellow's not gonna happen.
These kind of standards are not new. We have a consultant that is very well versed in these kind of standards.
Absolutely.
It's the first time they're being applied to Manatee County. But if you look back at the literature for urban planning, urban development, urban redevelopment, this stuff is not new. And I'm sure you could explain that Little John has worked on these kind of projects in other successful redevelopment areas. So to impose these standards where it's might be new in Manatee County, these are well-founded standards that are applied to encourage high-quality urban and infill redevelopment. That's why we're doing this. And I said at the last meeting, you know, it's pretty specific. We're going to have to hold some hands with some of the folks that aren't used to this. They're going to perhaps see the incentives and not see all the requirements. So we're going to have to, you know, help them through this to understand some of this. So we're forging ahead with this, but I think Charles knows exactly why it's needed because of these neglected areas. And it's something I know that as long as I've been around Manatee County since 1983, it's been asked for. It's been asked for, how do we invest in the urban core in the existing neighborhoods that take advantage of the existing infrastructure? How do we do that and give an opportunity for high-quality development in this urban core? What do we do? And that's what we have here. These are the standards we have. Maybe they'll need to be tweaked, who knows? That's why I bring up the issue of landscaping, because I want to make sure that it is high-quality urban redevelopment area. But I think that, you know, the people that are the naysayers and saying, you know, we can't do this because we have problems elsewhere in this community. Yeah, we do. But a lot of it was developed before there was zoning. I know a lot of the issues that are in some of these older areas. You know, there's things that are grandfathered in. There were decisions that were made, administrative determinations on how things fit when they didn't comply with the existing zoning or the zoning changed. I mean, we got a lot of those areas in Manatee County in the older parts of the developed area, down where I live in southeast Manatee County. But these kind of standards, they're very prescriptive. We're gonna need to make sure that they're applied correctly, and I think we've done a good job. And there's been a lot of discussion about these in work sessions, in millennial meetings, in all kinds of public meetings. These things have been discussed, and so I'm hoping that this board, I'm pretty sure from everyone I've heard, is going to move these things forward. Yeah.
Based upon the staff report, evidence presented, comments made
Not
by
on
at
the
the
board.
public hearing, the action of the planning commission in finding the request to be consistent with the Manatee County Comprehensive Plan in accordance with section 341 of the Land Development Code, I move to adopt ordinance 16-24, amending the Manatee County Land Development Code as recommended by the planning commission.
Second.
You can make a motion.
That was
anytime.
I was
excellent.
asked John, I pushed my
Wow.
button to make a motion.
Well, okay. Doesn't matter. So do we have a second?
Yes.
Yeah, you already had a second.
Okay.
All right, Commissioner Whitmore.
Well, I was going to make a motion, that's it.
Oh,
So
well.
was I.
Yeah,
I was on the board.
to do that too.
And I would have second Larry's motion.
I would have seconded
Yours?
Commissioner Whitmore's motion.
Was
Would you
trying.
like me to withdraw the
Is there
motion?
any
Yeah.
need to
Yeah, you
pass
withdraw
the
it.
item number 2 first?
We have to do one.
Because it's a land development code.
No,
and
Madam
then-
Chair,
It's the ta-
you can vote on the current motions for the countywide amendments. You can vote on that first and then vote on the urban corridors
And
second.
then let Larry make a motion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Commissioner Bustle, did you have anything on this before we vote?
No.
You're still on board. Commissioner DiSabatino, did you?
Yeah, I just wanted to really thank everyone for working
Yeah,
on it,
great
and,
job.
and so, and just, we all remember way back when I first came here, that Cooper Creek Shopping Center,
yeah.
that was a horrible shopping center, and Benderson's took
Oh.
a chance. And now, I mean, that
Look
is
at it.
first class, so, you know, they're gonna take a chance on 41, I know it, so thank you.
Somebody.
All right, I'm next on the board, real quick. Just in looking at my computer, which, by the way, I have no problem at home. I looked at everything this weekend, everything opened for me. But I'm seeing dates here, I'm seeing documents. December 1708, July 09, September the 26th, 16, 2010. So I'm not sure where the 2002 came from, but obviously it's inaccurate. That being said, we have a motion by Commissioner Chappie, second by Commissioner DiSabatino. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. It is unanimously approved. So we don't
Now,
need two
Larry.
separate motions?
Larry needs
Larry
to make
needs
the
to
motion.
do the next one.
Larry, make the next one.
Commissioner Bustle?
All right, for item number 1, I move the recommended motion, which is
No, number 2.
Number two.
Number two.
number 2, sorry, which is 16-06.
Yes.
Second.
We have, my mind went blank. We have a motion by Commissioner Bustle, second by Commissioner DiSabatino. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. It is approved unanimously. Good job.
Excellent
Good
work.
job.
Madam Chair, if I may for just a
Yes, sir,
moment, please.
please.
All the pieces of the puzzle start to come together.
Yes.
You're going to see more pieces created and developed. We're going to have some work sessions coming up to talk about those. I want to publicly thank these two ladies behind me
Oh, yeah.
and the many people that work with them and behind them. People have put a tremendous amount of effort into this, and I'm glad you pointed those things out, Commissioner Benak, in the code about the colors and things like that. They tried to think of it. They planned for everything.
No
That's
bright
why they're
color.
called planners.
So are we going to lose
So-
Pat now? We're not going to see
Lady,
Pat anymore?
Thank
Pat,
you.
you're not leaving us, are you?
In Orlando, I think. Don't you? You live in Orlando?
She's going to move here since the place
You don't want to
is
go
gonna-
home, do you?
I live in Orlando, but I'm going to be back in early December to talk to you about something else we're working on.
Oh, okay.
Good. I mean, you ought to just move here, really. All right, what'd you say?
Ready to go.
Gavel.
Gavel? I got it. All right, that being all the business of this board today.
Last meeting.
Chappie,
Well,
Commissioner
we have
Bustle,
the
it's been an
fourth
honor.
Thursday.
Yeah.
The honor has been mine.
All right.
So much.
The meeting is adjourned.
Good and bad.